supervised parenting time visitation. So when does this come up? What's a situation where it could happen? What is it? What does it mean? What are the types of supervised visitation, parenting time? How do you get it changed back to where it's unsupervised? These are some things I wanted to cover today. So, this comes up in divorce, family law, work. You're in a divorce case or a custody case and you have kids and the other parent thinks that you're a threat to yourself or others, or there's a history of problems with domestic violence or drug use or alcohol abuse, or maybe you're just estranged from the kids. You haven't seen the kids, even if it's no fault of your own. It's a young child, haven't seen them for a while, and before you can start up parenting time, the court's requiring you to do some supervised kind of stuff with them where you have to have somebody else present while you're seeing your kids. So this can certainly come up. There might be a history of mental illness, there might be abandonment kind of stuff, you haven't been around, or inappropriate, whatever it is. There's things that have happened that have triggered you to be required to do supervised parenting time. So then what? So what is that going to mean? Well, one of the common mistakes we see is you get a court order in place for supervised parenting time or visitation, and there's no limit on it. There's no duration. How long am I supposed to do this? Until the kid's 18? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But if it's not till then when is it? And so a common mistake we'll see that you want to watch out for is you need to put duration into these court orders, whether it's by agreement or whether you're at a court hearing. If you're doing supervised parenting time, how much for how long? 5 visits and then it's unsupervised, or 5 visits and then we're back to court, or the court's saying you got to do this for 6 months. Well, what about 5 months? I think it's easy sometimes as a court to just throw out these arbitrary durations of do this for 2 months. Well, what's so special about 2 months? How about 5 weeks? So it's weird. So you want to make sure you get a duration, even if you don't get what you want something in there. Well, all too many times I'll meet with somebody and they come in and they got a court order for supervised parenting time or visitation. They didn't do what they were supposed to do, first of all. And then the court order doesn't even say how long they were supposed to do it. Well, no wonder they gave up. I mean, they felt like this was just going to be this endless nonsense when they didn't feel like they needed supervised parenting time in the first place. So you want to look out for that. That's an important thing. But then what are the types of visitation, supervised visitation? So what can you end up with on this road of having to have somebody with you when you are seeing your kids, hopefully for short term? Well, I mean, one supervisor could be a therapist sort of thing. Let's say you haven't had a relationship with this child for 2 years and you're getting back together, whatever reason, you haven't seen them, now you're going to see them. One way to do it would be to go through a therapist. You set up visitation, you set up initially meeting with the therapist and the child, you do that, set up some duration on that, how many times you're going to do that until it goes to the next stage. So that's one way it could happen. Another way is through a court order. You can end up at some institution that does these kind of things. It's a domestic violence shelter related type of thing, or whatever it might be. It's a place that does these. Part of their business model is they set up visitation for people that need supervised visitation, and they schedule it and they tell you to come in for 2 hours on Saturday, and you are in somebody's office and you're meeting with you get to see your kid, and then the other person has to be there. So that's another way that this could happen, and how it could be supervised is through like a private company, like an institution, a social worker type of place, something like that. That could also happen. Or you could agree on a relative or a friend. If there's somebody that you and the mom, maybe you don't agree on much, but you could both agree that grandma is totally fine when it comes to supervision, have a relative or somebody supervise it. That's always best. You don't want to get into having to go to some place and go, and you got to pay to be there, and they only have 1 hour on Saturday available, or maybe they don't have any time available. You don't want that. Ideally you'd get a family friend or a family member to supervise it. And again, this all should just be temporary anyways. There's no reason you should be having to have your visits with your kid and have someone watch you. Or, that should be very short-term kind of stuff in the first place. So you set it up where you have a family member or friend do it. That's another way, that this might happen. So you got therapist supervised, you got third-party supervised, which would be a family member or friend. It could also be an agency like we talked about. You go into a private place, an office. So those are usually the 3 types of supervisors, as in like who's going to do it. But then how do you go from supervised to unsupervised? Well, first of all, if there's a discussion going on that you're supposed to have supervised parenting time or visitation, you want to look at what the reasons are for this, what's going on. you could agree to something and reach some sort of temporary agreement, but you really don't have much to lose. If you're getting divorced or have a custody case going, and the mother of the kids is saying that you have to be supervised for you to see your kids, then you say, well, then let's do a court hearing. I have nothing to lose. The court's gonna let me see my kids no matter what. You can kind of assume that. So if your only offer to me is that I have to have someone watch me while I'm seeing my kids, then I'm gonna do a court hearing, see what the judge says. They might not agree with that. They might not make me do supervised parenting time or visitation. So don't negotiate. It's really not a good place to be negotiating. It's really an all or nothing kind of thing. If the person is saying you have to be supervised, make them prove it. You have nothing to lose. And when you're in court, if the judge decides you have to be supervised or have some kind of supervised parenting time visitation, then ask questions at the hearing. Make sure you add, well, how long is this supposed to go on? What's the duration? Make sure you nail down things like that. And then you got something to go on. If it says you got to do 5 visits and then it's unsupervised, then you do that and you're done. If it says 5 visits, come back to court, okay, that's better than nothing. You don't want to have these open-ended things. All too many times I see these open-ended court orders. You want to stay away from those as much as possible. You know, those are just no good. So, but there's the different types. There's looking out for the duration. There's making sure that this is all, why is this even happening in the first place? You know, your wife wants you to be supervised for visitation. Why don't you say you want her to be supervised for visitation? I mean, why is this reasonable? How does this make sense? It happens. You know, there's situations where the court will feel that in the safety of the children, or they really don't know what's going on, but there's a lot of allegations against you going on, make you do some supervised parenting time for a little while. A lot of different reasons they could order it, but there's a right way to handle it, just like everything else. You want to ask the right questions, put limits on this. This is a very crazy kind of thing when you think about it, that somebody's going to supervise you while you're with your kids. That's a weird concept, and you want to make sure that you rein that in as much as possible. Get that very, very limited. Get the right attorney, get the right advice.